are Agilists faring in the pandemic? How are we finding meaning and purpose in these troubled times? How can we connect, inspire, and support each other? We will explore answers to these questions and more. This is Agile Caravanserai. I'm Sanjeev Augustine. Ron Jeffries is one of the 17 authors of the Agile Manifesto and also a co-creator of the wildly popular Extreme Programming or XP methodology. For decades, Ron has been a vocal proponent of Agile software development techniques. Ron evolved XP along with Kent Beck and Ward Cunningham on the now famous Chrysler C3 project, where they proved out software development techniques such as test-driven development or TDD, refactoring, automated build and test, and pair programming. In fact, 20 years later, those practices form the basis of what we today know as DevOps. In the early 2000s, Ron's book, Extreme Programming Installed, provided some amazingly practical and valuable advice for those of us who were early proponents and adopters of XP and Agile methods in general. Since then, teaming with Chet Hendrickson, Ron has continued to be a strong mentor of XP and Agile methods. And Ron has a very special place in my own Agile journey. 2 decades ago, Ron trained the 3 XP teams that I ended up managing. Ron also trained my friend and colleague Bob Payne, who became my Agile coach and the coach for those 3 Agile teams. Since then, over the decades, we've all met at the various Agile conferences, and I have continued to benefit from Ron's wisdom. And Ron has shared that wisdom openly and generously with people all over the world in so many different ways. I remember his site xprogramming.org that he used to distill and propagate his knowledge all over the world. Since then, of course, he's moved to his new site, ronjeffries.com, and continue to share nuggets of practical advice and wisdom with all and sundry. Today, Ron continues to share that wisdom related to Agile software development and extreme programming, and remains an uber mentor of XP. Keep it up, Ron, and let's hear it from the man himself. First of all, thank you for all the stuff you've done for the Agile community, and then thank you for being on this conversation.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. It should be a little bit of fun for a sort of a gray day.
It is a gray. It turned out to be really gray and cold over here. I'm sure you're part of the world.
We're a little warmer today than we have been, but it's still pretty gray.
All right, we're in the opposite direction. Okay, so why don't we just jump in the first question? The first question I have for you is, it is coming up on the 20th anniversary of the Agile Manifesto, the signing of the Agile Manifesto it is. And you corrected me last time. I think I was calling you guys signatories, and you said, no, the 17 folks were authors. So thank you for that correction. So as an author of the Agile Manifesto, what are some of your reflections kind of looking back over the last 20 years? Looking forward to hearing about that.
Of course, as an author, it really means you were one of the 17 guys in the meeting. But I don't recall writing much on the board.
Yeah.
Well, as I look back at what has happened, I don't really think that at the time we thought there would be any kind of a revolution. We were just 17 people who had some common ideas, and we thought, well, let's get together, have a meeting, talk about it. And then the idea came up of publishing this little manifesto, and so we did. We really thought that we were onto something, that we had a set of ideas that come together in a sensible way that would help with software development. But I don't recall that we were thinking, this is going to explode into some big thing. So it sort of did explode into some big thing. There are big companies who claim to be doing Agile. There are thousands of programmers, and it seems sometimes like thousands of consultants who are in this space. we saw an interesting sort of a coalescence of ideas around Agile as the years went on. At the beginning, where at first, to my recollection, the testers began being interested in kind of coming into the fold and arguing about how you had to do testing and how you couldn't do it quite this way and you had to do that way. We began to see people-oriented people, Diana Larson, Esther Derby, and others, who were really focusing on the human interactions. And of course, software development, even if you think of it as just this little core of stuff, has to exist in a world of all this other stuff. So it was, I think, good and natural that it began to pick up this gravitational field of other specialties than software. The odd thing that has happened, or at least it seems odd to me, is that in the course of that, it's as if software development has become forgotten. Clearly, it hasn't been totally forgotten. There's plenty of us who are still really focused on that. But when we look at things like the notion of scaling, the idea that somehow you have to do something with your entire company so that you can have agile software development is odd. And the notion that you would scale it when you can't even do it is odd. Chet Hendrickson likes to say that you have to be able to do a thing before you can scale it. And I think he's exactly right, that if you can't put together 5, 6, or 10 people who can do agile software development, it seems silly to imagine that you're going to have 5, 6, or 10, 100, or 10,000 people who can do it. And I personally believe that the record bears me out on that. I think it's rare that there's ever been a large company agile transformation that has really done anything like what we could see about it. Now, part of that, and I think this is the part that I find most disappointing, part of that is due to the fact that historically there's been very little investment in helping developers learn how to do the things you have to do to be agile. And it isn't just the same old thing. We, as developers, if we're trained at all, we're trained in a sort of a big design cycle, analysis, design, development, testing kind of a cycle. And more than half of developers aren't even trained in that. They're simply thrown into a giant room full of programmers and told to code something. And one of the few things that has remained absolutely true, I think, throughout the 20 years of Agile, or 25 in my case, since I started in 96, the thing that has remained absolutely the case is there are certain things you have to do differently. And we still don't know any better ways of doing those things differently, really, than we did then. We have better tools. We have learned how to do a faster cycle. But the notion of test-driven development, the notion that you write a little tiny test and then write a little tiny bit of code and then another little test, a little bit of code. Ideas like that were there from the beginning still seem to be there. Yeah. And we still see most programmers not even knowing what they are. But what is odd is that if as I've done, as people I know have done, if you're teaching a course for certified Scrum Masters, for example, which is an odd role that Scrum has, which is someone with responsibility, no authority. If you survey the class and say, what is the Agile Manifesto? What are the 4 values of the Agile Manifesto? You will typically find that more than half of that class does not know what the Agile Manifesto is, has never seen it, has never heard of it. It's just like, well, I don't know, never knew that. That's very interesting. So in a way, the thing started this wave, but there's this vast array of people now who are supposedly doing it, who are supposedly learning to be agile and being managed to be agile and being coached to be agile and whatever to be agile, who don't know what it is and have had no access to the techniques that they need in the case of developers to do it. Okay. Now, that has led a number of people, one of them I know you've already talked to, Alistair Coburn, to kind of go back to roots, and he's done this lovely Heart of Agile thing that just defines Agile in 4 terms, and is a good way to remember what the thing is. And I think Heart of Agile is a it's a good way of looking at. Come on, here's what this really is. Let's focus in on this. We also have Josh Karievsky, who's done Modern Agile,
right,
which is a little bit more, I believe, a commercial venture, but really focused on similar ideas to Alistair's.
Right.
I don't know which one is first. I don't think it matters which one is first. One of the notions that Joshua has touched on is both with Modern Agile and prior to it, is the notion of safety.
Right.
We asked in the manifesto that developers be self-organizing. And in order to be self-organizing, it has to be safe to be self-organizing, not safe, but not dangerous to be self-organizing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a key dimension.
Yep. Because
in most companies, managers think their job is to manage. And they think that means that they're to tell people what to do. And then when people aren't doing the right thing, they're supposed to fix them and correct them. And that makes for a power dynamic which does not feel safe to the people on the bottom of the power dynamic. And so when you're building an agile team, you need to remove that. And if you look at what I would consider the good agile methods, they basically don't even speak to the notion of what does a manager do.
Right. Or
if they do, they say, well, first make a list of all the things your team could do, or your scrum master could do, or your product owner could do, and then if there's anything left over, you're looking at management things. That some people say, well, that's because you were frightened by a manager in your youth, and that may well be. Kent Beck once said that all methodologies are based on fear. And to a degree, that's true. But you do have to withdraw that management pressure from a team to let them self-organize.
Sounds good.
But you have to go beyond that. You have to get them, then you have to have a team that actually knows how to do it. And that needs to be learned.
So I love those points. And I think you make some very good points that the manifesto was initially about software development. Things have expanded. And now it's time to sort of maybe get back to some of those basics, whether it's with Modern Agile or with Heart of Agile. And I do want to sort of bring this back a little bit to the personal side, because that's part of this conversation, is to ask you, Ron, how are you doing in the pandemic? So you were a coach to my Agile coach, Bob Payne, who's now a colleague of mine. Mm-hmm. You coached Bob back in the day, and as a coach and a mentor to so many people, we wanted to check in with you and see, how are you doing in this pandemic?
Well, fortunately, I think, or perhaps unfortunately, I was sort of logically retired for perhaps as much as 18 months before this. More and more, I was just turning down opportunities to travel. Mm-hmm. I would occasionally go and teach a course with Chet, or I would go and do a little something. But I had become very tired of spending time on airplanes. And although it's really fun to work with a group of people who are hungry to do this stuff,
right,
I find it very boring and depressing to work with people who are just being forced to learn Scrum or forced to go to some session like that, or who are simply working in an organization that isn't going to be able to support them in really being lifted up. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of drifting away from doing much of anything except writing anyway. Mm-hmm. As you can tell from the video, I probably have not had a haircut yet this year. If I have, it was in February. So I've been certainly hunkering down and staying out of the public view. But I'm mostly an introvert anyway. So I've got my wife and my cat, and I can go to the coffee shop and say hi to the coffee people and buy a coffee and come back home, and it works pretty well for me.
So it sounds like as long as it's good coffee, you're okay.
Well, I actually drink chai. I don't like coffee. I would have to say that the situation, not just with the pandemic, but with the bizarre politics we have going on in this country, has gotten me down a bit. It's gotten me worried. So that it isn't. I think it's hard to look at the way people are at each other's throats today and feel totally positive about the world and about this country and many other countries, as a matter of fact. And it's hard to see quite how we're going to get out of that. So that bothers me a little bit. Yeah. But fortunately, what I mostly care about is software development. And so what I've been doing is little bits of software development and writing up what I do. I've created a series of games duplicating space war, duplicating asteroids, duplicating space invaders on my iPad with a little language called Codia, which is a Lua language. I'm now working on a dungeon game. So I've written, 100 or 200 articles lately at the rate of one a day on how you do software in this style, or more accurately, how I do software. And sometimes I do it in a really religiously correct Agile fashion. And sometimes I just bash my head and make it go, because these practices are not some kind of God-given thing that you must do. Right. They are techniques, and a good developer knows how to select from all the techniques at their disposal, trying to stay close to the top of the technique bag and rarely reach way down and get the bizarre stuff out. So I've been having a good time and have perhaps as many as 6 people who actually read these articles. Just kind of doing my software development thing, doing my Be on Twitter thing, doing my various Zooms and Slacks and stuff that kind of keep me in touch with other human beings.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're able to do that and stay focused and stay positive and be prolific and productive as well. So I know it's getting to time. So what I'd like to get into the third part of the conversation very short, briefly, if you would. You did say that you were depressed, somewhat feeling down on the situation right now. At the same time, one of the reasons that I started these conversations is that when it comes to agile methods and when it comes to software development, it can be a unifying message, right? So if you're looking forward, what inspiration and particularly what kind of unifying inspiration do you think you would have, and advice, especially for the next generation of agilists that are probably looking at us and saying, what's wrong with these guys? And gals, they seem just a little crazy, right?
Well, I don't know that I would say that. I don't know that I should say what I do is advice. What I will do is say what I think, show what I do, and let people take from it what they want. If you want to do what I suggest, that's great. And if you want to find a better way, that's fine too. If you want to find a worse way, you get to drive your own life. The thing that to me is particularly valuable is my particular craft, which happens to be software. But we all have some thing that we do because we really want to do it. And if we're lucky, we can earn a living at it. Some of us cannot. You know, if your thing is art, you may well never be able to earn a living at it.
Right.
There's very few people ever manage to do it. Your thing could be management. Your thing could be leadership. Your thing could be testing. Your thing could be writing. It could be doing podcasts. There's all of the things that we would do. I have been happiest when I have hung the closest to what I think of as my particular craft, which is software. And as I've moved away from that, even into positions that seemed better, like, oh, you could be a manager or a vice president or whatever. I made more money, but I wasn't as happy as I could be when I was doing the other thing. Now, it's probably hard to be happy as a software developer working in the code mines of Ohio. There's probably just, too much mining and not enough creativity. But even there, you've got ways of learning how to do things better, and you can, there's always open source things and, building one's own things and so on. So I think that what I've kind of always felt this way, and I feel it more and more as I get older and older, sticking to what you care about instead of going where you think you ought to go where you think you want to go to the degree that you can. I think that works best. In software, which is my deal, I really would urge people to look at the basic techniques of Agile software development and learn from them what is going to make sense to them. Now, in the kind of software I write, the kind of software that is like software, test-driven development, acceptance test-driven development, refactoring, these things are core capabilities to know. There's all kinds of language things to know. If you're working in JavaScript, you could study JavaScript for the rest of your life. And there are ways of building programs today that are not quite the same as I just described. A lot of programs today are just wired together from microservices. There is the programming of microservices, which is so small that some Agilists argue you don't really need to test them in the same way that we would test a larger program, because it's just a small program. You just test a little bit and there it is. It's perfect. You can read it and see what it is. And then there's all the creation of web-based things, which again is not so much a coding thing as an assembly of things, and then wrapping it. I mean, if your website looks good, it's not because of the content, it's because of the CSS. So we need to learn how to do all of that. If a person is able to find a kind of work that they like, that can get them paid, if it were advice, my advice would be stick close to that. Stay, don't move away from and move out of your comfort zone. Try to learn new things and try to bash new ideas into your head and all that. But don't think you've got to be a manager or a product owner or a coach if what you really like being is a developer. On the other hand, don't hesitate to be a manager if that's what you think you would like to do. And if you find you don't like it, don't hesitate to move to another position.
Awesome. So, Ron, thank you very much. That's very sage advice. So I want to thank you once again for joining me today. I really appreciate the opportunity, and I hope everything goes well for you and all our other Agilists out there going forward. Thank you.
Well, thanks. It's been fun.